Welcome back to video number 3 in the series, Understanding Adolescents by Walking in Their Shoes. As a reminder, the goal of this series is to help us make the shift to thinking developmentally about youth. As in previous videos, we'll explore how young people adapt to the developmental changes of adolescence by accomplishing developmental tasks. I'm Kristen Teipel, Director of the State Adolescent Health Resource Center at the University of Minnesota, and a partner in the Adolescent and Young Adult Health National Resource Center. I'm a guide for this review. We'll take a look at tasks specifically related to the young person's changing identity and relationships in this video. So let's start with the changing sense of self, which includes 4 related tasks: thinking differently while test driving a new brain, and answering the question, who am I?, while also exploring values and beliefs and their role in the world. As before, we'll walk through what changes, how young people adapt to these changes, and what we see that tells us that they're working in this task. So let's pick up with task number 3. This is all about a young person's developing brain and learning to think a new way. Changes related to a new way of thinking are amazing and spectacular. As you well know, young people's brain develops during adolescence. All areas of the brain grow, and it's not completed until somewhere in the ages of 25 to 30. So keep this in mind as we work with young adults. So more brain cells, neurons connect better, information is transferred more quickly and efficiently, and communication across the brain improves. Different regions and circuits of the brain mature at very different rates. For example, the brain region responsible for processing fear and emotions develops way ahead of the region that's the seat of reasoning and executive control. So there's a bit of a mismatch, which contributes to the higher likelihood of emotional responses, anxiety, and acting more impulsively. So along with the brain changing, there's a shift in how they think from concrete to abstract thought. So keep in mind, concrete thinking is like my nephew. When he was 5, we asked him, "Hey, can you count from 1 to 10 backwards?" And he looked at us with utter oh, of course I can. And he stood up very proudly and spun around his back to us and said, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Concrete thinking. So the move to abstract thinking, now young people begin to understand things that can't be seen, heard, or touched. Think about things like higher math. They also can think about possibilities, multiple options, pondering things hypothetically, the age-old what-if questions, and following a logical thought process. They can think ahead, and how important that is to develop that skill for planning. And finally, they can think about thinking, that ability to consider how they feel, how they think, what others might be thinking, and how others might perceive them. With all of these brain changes, young people hone their executive functioning skills. What are these skills? We'll take a look at the list. How many of these are the ones that we assume adolescents already have in place when we work with them? Think about sexuality education. The need to plan ahead or to reason, to manage impulses, to make judgments, make decisions. How important it is for us to remember that learning these skills is similar to a baby learning how to walk. First, they scoot around the edges first with these skills, and getting lots of help from us, then reverting back to earlier ways of reasoning for a while, and then finally taking off running as they get these skills under their belt. Now this is a change I love watching happen, the ability to see another person's perspective. It's a new way of thinking that evolves, and it moves from there's only one perspective, and that's mine, to there's 2 perspectives, mine and yours, but I can only keep one in my brain at a time, not both simultaneously. And finally, the ability to see multiple perspectives all at the same time. Think of the world that opens when you can do that. This ability to see someone else's perspective is useful in life. It helps a young person to understand the effect of their actions on others, manage healthy relationships, deal with conflicts, and much, much more. So when teens struggle with these issues, it's important to assess where they are in their ability to see another person's perspective and give opportunities for them to step into other people's shoes. Okay, that's what changes. Let's look at what we see that tells us that they're working on this change. One clear-cut sign is teens are practicing new ways of thinking is their tendency to argue and debate. They now can see so many possibilities and perspectives at the same time they're figuring out how to sort this all out and don't yet have a wealth of experience to draw from. They're also working on communication and problem-solving skills. Arguing for the sake of arguing is practice. A really good practical article on this is What Middle School Parents Should Know. Adolescents are like lawyers. As it notes, middle schoolers anticipate arguments, twisting them in ways you never thought they could. Now that they can think about what you're thinking, they can anticipate the arguments you're going to make and come up with good counter-arguments ahead of time. And they can take arguments you've made in the past and use it in ways you sure wouldn't. The tendency to overcomplicate situations, get overwhelmed, social situations, schoolwork, problems with friends, planning ahead, you name it, is another visible sign of this task. This is related to the wide world that's now opened up in their heads with a new ability to see a wide array of possibilities and different perspectives, but without a clear-cut process to manage all of this. Add to this their brain maturing at different rates in the area for emotion, fear, and anxiety in relation to the area for rational reasoning, and you get drama. Drama is really about adolescents working on social and emotional skills. Think of the situation in which two students in a school pass each other in the hall in what looks like a neutral way. One later gets upset saying, "Did you see the dirty look he or she gave me?" Or get upset about being disrespected by a casual comment thrown out from one to the other. If we dig into the underlying emotion behind the situations, we'll probably find they fear being judged or ostracized. This fits with their heightened capacity for fear, anxiety, and emotion. This drama provides an excellent opportunity for us to help them identify these underlying emotions or anxieties and support them to practice the skills to empathize and take another's perspective. We also see young people drawn to emotional intensity, things that are thrilling, exciting, adventurous, and risky. This shift to taking risks and stretching outside of their comfort zone is a functional, normative part of development, because moving into the independence of adulthood, something that's new and unknown, requires the willingness and ability to take risks. Think about what it takes to make your own life choices, such as education, where and with whom to live, employment, living out their values and beliefs, starting a life with another person. Riskier behaviors are definitely part of this mix. The ones we fear, sex, drugs, and motor vehicle management, and much more. It's easy to think that teens just don't understand the risks, but research shows that they do. It's just that they analyze risk and benefit differently than adults. Think about what benefits are the top for adolescents, especially younger teens. Feeling normal and fitting in, being with friends, having fun. These benefits hold higher weight in the trade-off of risk versus benefit. So take, for example, deciding whether or not to drink alcohol or smoke marijuana at a party. The benefits in the teen's mind might be fitting in, which is really important, having fun. All my friends are having fun and I really want to be part of that. These are emotional and immediate. The risks, on the other hand, things like getting pregnant, crashing a car, losing your place on a sports team. These aren't good, but they're also a bit hypothetical. And also I perceive the risk but misjudge its relationship to me. So for example, it didn't happen to me last time, or the last 5 times I drank, so I must be immune. So just a quick warning. Brain development and test driving a new brain is not about teens being unable to control their emotions and always making bad decisions, acting impulsively, and being self-focused. Instead, teens can control emotions, impulses, and behaviors, just not routinely and consistently. And remember that benefits outweigh risks, and they're still learning and need practice.
We sometimes laugh about teenagers. They're parodied, sometimes even demonized in the media for their kind of typical teenage behavior. They take risks, they're sometimes moody, they're very self-conscious. So what's sometimes seen as the problem with adolescents, heightened risk-taking, poor impulse control, self-consciousness, shouldn't be stigmatized. It actually reflects changes in the brain that provide an excellent opportunity for education and social development. Thank you.
Words of wisdom. So let's shift to task number 4, developing a strong, stable sense of self, a central task of adolescence. It's clearly intertwined with learning to think a new way. Now teens can think differently about themselves and figure out their identity. While this process goes all throughout life, it really changes up in adolescence. So they move from the child whose self-concept is tied to the adults around them, but also learning to see themselves as separate from others, into adolescence, where for the first time they really begin to think about how their identity affects their life, what their future could be like, and what they want their future to be. It's the challenge of creating a life story in which they can see themselves as the same person over time in a way that pulls together the past, present, and connects to an emerging future. And this is a developmental area in which the world around the young person really has an impact. The messages and opportunities we give or don't give to youth, whether positive, negative, or indifferent, really makes a difference. So the most obvious change is what they believe about themselves. They explore all aspects of who they are. So think of the backpack, taking out their identity they were given and playing around with it. What do I think about myself? What am I good at? What am I not so good at? What will I do with my life? What do others think? What do I want them to think about me? And what does this all mean? Another important aspect of changing identity is whether or not dominant culture reflects the young person positively, accurately, and without bias. Depending on this fit, identity work is easier or harder. So take racism, for example. This is a common experience for many minority youth. In a 2009 study of youth ages 8 to 18 on perceived racism and discrimination, 88%, the vast majority, had at least one experience with racial discriminations in settings including school and community, places where they spend a lot of time. And more than 1 in 10 experienced racism in at least half of the 23 situations addressed in the survey. And it's not just race and ethnicity, but sexual orientation, gender identity, physical ability and disability, and much, much more. Many of our young people don't find a good fit between their identity and the dominant culture. And that's a crisis, because having a strong identity is associated with positive outcomes, including healthier perceptions of self, healthier behaviors, and better academic performance. And young people with a strong identity can buffer against challenges due to neighborhood disadvantage, chronic stress, discrimination, and racism. So a third change in identity is the drive for meaning. With their ability to think abstractly and explore their identity, young people are drawn to knowing the whys of life and not just the hows. They question what they believe, they try on new beliefs, decide what's important to them and what's not. As with the other developmental tasks, young people give us signs that they're working hard on their sense of identity. The most obvious sign is they try out new identities. We can observe this in how they express themselves. Think about their dress, their hair, their piercings, who they hang out with, the roles they take on and activities they get involved in, even the name they take. Let's take, for example, how young people dress. While that annoys and frustrates many of us adults, it's actually a developmental form of communication. It helps teens express their identity as a person and with a particular peer group, while also expressing a need to be different from adults. It shows their quest for autonomy and independence. Because of their desire for meaning, they question everything: values they've grown up with, religious beliefs, diet, race and ethnicity, family, and more. It may feel or look like they're rejecting our beliefs and values, when instead they're just figuring out what it means. Why should I believe this? How does this fit with who I am or want to be? Is there a different way of thinking about this? What does my conscience tell me? In addition to questioning beliefs, they test drive them. Young people get involved in causes that are important to them. Fits with the idea that you really know something when you can teach it or do it for someone else. Getting involved in making a difference is something they do both in person and online. So for example, DoSomething.org. It's an online organization for social change in youth. It has 5.3 million youth who are members, tackling volunteer campaigns that impact causes like poverty, discrimination, and the environment. As young people figure out who they are, they also experiment with the role they play in the world. They take on leadership roles, get active in their culture, take on jobs, pursue opportunities to learn both in school and outside. So we've explored the tasks related to the changing sense of self. Now let's shift to tasks related to changing relationships with peers and parents and caregivers. So task number 5 is all about peers and friends, taking these friendships to a new level. Peers play an increasingly important role in the lives of youth during adolescence. In many ways, these friendships are an essential part of their development. And there's a biological connection for this. Being drawn to peers is actually a neurological sensitivity initiated by hormone changes. Who knew? If you look back into history, adolescence was the age to find a mate and start a family while separating from parents and striking out on one's own. This required a brain that prompted them to think and even obsess about others. So this connection to peers is hardwired. What changes? Well, the nature of the relationships change from childhood to adolescence. They become more complex and exclusive and intimate in ways than they were as children. And friendships are often involving multiple friends and belonging to multiple groups. And of course, you can throw in romantic relationships. The influence of peers is stronger on their self-concept than it was when they were children. So what do we know about peer influence? It really peaks in the middle school years as it helps young teens develop a sense of autonomy from parents. It's stronger at this age because younger teens want to fit in and are more likely to follow the behavior of their peers than older adolescents. It wanes throughout high school years as teens focus attention on identity development, along with the emotional and social strength to resist the influence of their peers. So why are these peer relationships important? They really help young people identify who they are. It provides feedback about their development in ways they can't get from adults. And peers are who they do lots of practice with. Social skills, trying out new beliefs, roles, behaviors. They also find acceptance and a sense of belonging. And belonging is a fundamental sense to happiness and well-being. And of course, they find fun and excitement with their peers and friends. Youth with close and supportive peer relationships tend to do better, not surprisingly. They're more socially competent, have better sense of self-worth, emotionally healthier, more motivated and active in school, and less likely to become involved in behavior problems. Cheryl Feinstein, the Dean of Education at the University of Nebraska-Kearney, sums up the importance of peers as she says, "Hanging out. As adults, we often view this as time lost, a pure and simple waste of an afternoon. But in actuality, this idleness provides a meaningful period of problem solving. It's while they're hanging and talking that they explore, negotiate, and make decisions. The next time you see them engaged in something that appears to be unproductive during lunch or after school, leave them to their mystifying deliberations. Resist the temptation to offer suggestions. They won't be appreciated. And just walk away knowing they're constructing a new and improved brain." Again, words of wisdom. Quality of peer relationships in childhood and adolescence may be one of the most important indicators of future psychological health. Teens who are socially isolated or lack good social skills are at risk. Let's pay attention and address this. So what do we see with these peer relationships? Well, the most obvious sign is that they hang out and spend more time with their peers and with less adult supervision. Most teens spend more than 50% of their waking hour with peers. They create close friendships that play a huge role in their life. They're in constant contact with close friends. School tends to be the primary place where they interact with these friends. And while social media keeps them in the loop, 58% of teens report spending time with their closest friend at someone's house. Another visible sign of this change in peer relationships are the cliques and crowds or networks of peers. Cliques are small groups of peers, usually the same sex and age, determined by common activities, hanging out together, talking to each other more often, and forming close-knit friendships. It promotes the development of these friendships and intimacy. Crowds are different. They're larger groups defined by reputation and stereotypes. Think of groups such as the Brains, Populars, Druggies, or Jocks. Names change, but you get the idea. Teens in a crowd may or may not spend time together, but it provides young people with the identity and eyes of peers. This can be both positive and negative. These peer groups have a purpose, as teens often adopt the styles and values and interests of the group. They do this to maintain an identity and find their place to belong in a network of social connections. This leads us to the peer influence again, or herd mentality. We know that teens take more risks when they're with their peers as compared to adults. So let's dissect this. Their brains are developing and more sensitive to anticipated rewards, and rewards are more intense. This helps motivate them to actions with a high potential for reward and pleasure. So think about what seems rewarding to teens. Not surprisingly, behaviors that can be risky. Think of the thrill of just making a light before it turns red. On top of this, research also shows this hypersensitivity to reward is more pronounced when they're with friends. And we see this. Take, for example, statistics that show a teen driver with the same age passenger in the car is at a higher risk of a fatal crash than an adolescent driving alone or with an adult. And we pay attention to this with policies like graduated driver's licenses. Let's keep in mind, though, that rewarding actions don't have to be risky. Peer influence can also be positive. For example, research by Dr. Lawrence Steinberg showed that teens learn more quickly and effectively with peers present than when they're on their own, a finding we should keep in mind as we work with young people. So the final task we're going to cover is a refinement of their relationship with parents and caregivers. And when I say parent, I mean the adult who is caring for, guiding, loving, and nurturing our young person. This could be a biological, adoptive, or step-parent, foster parent, grandparents, aunts or uncles, other caring adults who are responsible for parenting the teen. To make this simpler, I'll just use the term parent to refer to any and all of these adults. In this task, both teens and parents change in how they relate to each other. Youth work through their developmental tasks to separate and differentiate from their parents while also staying connected. And parents help their teens detach in order to foster a young person's growing trust in their self-reliance. These changes matter because secure attachment and feelings of warmth, love, and caring from parents, or parent connectedness, is associated with healthier behaviors, better mental health, and better social skills and coping strategies. So here are some of the changes. Obviously, teens need to break away from their parents and increasingly turn to their peers for validation and support, as we've already heard. Young people work on their identity and push for autonomy and get more involved with peers. This has an impact on their relationship with parents. Estimates show a 21% drop in waking hours spent with family between late childhood and middle adolescence, and increasing reliance on peers for intimacy and support. For the parent, everything about their identity and role as a parent changes. Who they are as a parent and how they parent shifts as they support their teen to explore new social roles away from the family, develop new relationships with peers and romantic partners, and shift their sense of identity. Parents need to find new ways to support their teen through recrafted relationships and roles.
When kids are born, the parents metaphorically are the manager of their life. They organize their life, they sign them up for classes, they take them to the playground, they set up play dates. And kids love us in this role. They love us as the manager. They look up to us. If you go into a kindergarten class and kids are clinging to their parents, they're showing them off to all their friends. It's just a wonderful thing. Then somewhere in late middle school, early high school, adolescence, they unceremoniously, without consulting with us, fire us as the manager of their life. And they basically say, that's it. I'll take over from here. When this happens, parents do one of two things. They either abandon their kids. I got fired. Okay, well, I'll go live my life. Good luck. I hope things work out. You know, first one up in the morning, let the cat out. If you're the last one in, make sure you lock the door and set the alarm. Or they end up fighting for control. I call it sort of they litigate for wrongful termination for the next 3 years, in which case nobody wins because you get into that battle about you want to stay the manager. When the reality is when they fire you, that's what they're supposed to do. That's how they're going to develop their independence. So the first thing what we really have to do when they fire us is grieve a little bit, get over it, and then our job is to get rehired as the consultant, which is different than a manager. It's not the face-to-face paradigm. It's much more it's about a half step back, side-by-side relationship with them. And from the consultant role, you can begin to think more about influence than control. And now you're going to have a healthy relationship with your teenagers as they go through adolescence.
Again, wise words helping parents shift from being managers to consultants. So what we see that tells us that teens are renegotiating this relationship with parents is primarily conflict. This is related to the push-pull of teens detaching from childhood to become adolescents and parents detaching from parenting a child to parenting an adolescent. Overall, conflict becomes more intense during early adolescence and typically tapers down into late adolescence. For families that move into adolescence with healthy relationships, this conflict is purposeful and a normal reaction to the push-pull situation the parents and teens find themselves. Of course, this developmental conflict can overwhelm families that are already challenged. For example, those who are highly stressed and working hard just to survive, or say, for example, new immigrant parents who are straddling multiple cultures, languages, and social norms. And for teens, conflict is also expressed as dissatisfaction with their parents. Dr. Carl Pickard, a psychologist in Austin, Texas, shares a story about this dissatisfaction in his parenting blog, Surviving Your Child's Adolescence. He writes, in counseling a young man, Carl asked how he could tell an adolescent had begun. Change, the youth replied. How my parents have changed. I don't like how my parents are more unfair than before, are harder to please than before, criticize more than before, are less trusting than before, are more serious than before, worry more than before, ask more questions than before, set conditions for what I want more than before, refuse more than before, take away more than before, understand less than before, listen less than before, lecture more than before, are tenser to talk with than before, are more boring than before, are more embarrassing than before, demand more chores than before, talk about grades more than before, like my interests less than before. That's dissatisfaction. They also test out the rules and limits they live under. It's clear with this developmental task, our focus should be supporting parents as they shift to guide and nurture their teen in new and different ways. As a resource, I suggest Carl Pickard's Surviving Your Child's Adolescence blog. It's practical and insightful, and you can find it on the Psychology Today website. Take a look. Okay, we've made it through the tasks related to a changing sense of self and changing relationships. So let's wrap this all up by identifying what young people need to be successful in learning how to think a new way and grow their brain, and refine their sense of self, and change relationships with peers and parents and caregivers. So take a few minutes to stop the video and think about all of these tasks. Then do a quick write. For each of the 4 tasks, jot down one idea on what teens need to help them be successful. Here's what I came up with. My first category is a repeat from video number 2. Young people need adults who stick with them through thick or thin to provide a web of support. They need us to listen, help them deal with drama, not engage in their arguments, and respond, not react to their identity developments. They need to set down neural connections in their brain by practicing. This means making decisions, analyzing and solving problems, doing things for others. You get the picture. Keep this in mind when we plan programs and activities. Doing and creating should be at the heart of this work. We need to talk with them about what they believe and why, and what we believe and why. And finally, learning should be interesting and fun. On one level, this means helping them find things to learn that spark their passion. On another level, when we teach them, make it active and fun. Games are great. Young people creating is fabulous. And research backs this up. Fun is not just beneficial, but required for authentic learning and long-term memory. So take a look at what and how we teach. My guess is we have some hard work to do in this. All of this makes it harder for us because it takes more of our time and effort. But it's better for young people. It's well worth the investment. So this is a related need, the opportunities to take risks that are healthy. These opportunities can be in areas like sports and the arts, but also learning and using new skills, creating and making a difference, teaching others. Be creative. Make sure all youth have these opportunities and not just youth who are easy to reach. Young people need to know about and find strength from their culture, especially if dominant culture doesn't positively reflect them. They need us to surround them with the people, places, and events that reflect them, teaches them about themselves, and gives them pride, belonging, and strength. They need to see themselves in the history that they learn about in school. Taking on the isms and discrimination is also critical. They need us to acknowledge and recognize it to help shift the world within which our young people grow. We need to talk with them about this honestly and help them learn how to respond in meaningful ways. Instead of shying away from young people and their peers, they need us to do the opposite and bring them together, support them to create healthy networks of friends. Helping them get to know each other and broaden their social network should be a critical part of any program in which we reach out to youth. Build it in, make it purposeful, not just a throwaway activity. Don't forget it. And finally, they need us to help their parents and caregivers. We need to teach these parents developmental changes of adolescence and their changing role, new ways to parent and how to let go and stay connected at the same time, supports for their own changes, and meeting their own needs so they can be healthy parents. And of course, we need to continue to invest in strong families. It's a great way to link health, the adolescent health, to all the early childhood development efforts. Okay, next steps. To put this all together, take a few minutes now or when you're done with this video to pick a need, one from your list or mine, that you can address in some way in your work. Write down the need and what you can do about it. In case you missed some of the resources highlighted in this video, here's how to connect with the Brain Development TED Talk by Sarah Jane Blakemore, the video on parents shifting from being managers to consultants, and Carl Pickart's parenting blog. When you're ready, be sure to come back and watch video number 4. There we'll pull it all together and explore how to apply this developmental focus to our work. As always, remember to keep thinking developmentally about youth in everything you do and help the people around you make this shift too. And finally, let me know what you think. Drop me an email with your ideas and insights and your stories. Thanks.